Ford has had a fair bit of criticism for not going electric, especially in Europe. Yes, there is the Mustang Mach-E, but that's a bit of a specialist car. They haven't had anything mainstream like Stellantis, for example. Now, however, we have this, the Explorer. It's a family-sized SUV. It's meant for outdoor fun, and I'm here in Slovenia at the launch of this car in left-hand drive form. It's coming to the UK this year. Before we take a look at the car itself, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Explorer presents a non-intimidating, fairly business-like front face. The first thing we should mention though, that this is not an all-new Ford platform. It's actually one shared with Volkswagen. At launch there's going to be two versions of this car. This one here is the dual motor car, which has 340 PS and a 78 kilowatt-hour battery. Then there's a single motor version with a slightly smaller 77 kilowatt-hour battery and 286 PS of power. In Q4 they're also going to launch another rear-wheel drive car with just a 52 kilowatt-hour battery and 170 PS. Although this shares a platform with Volkswagen, Ford says they've really changed the way the suspension and the handling operates compared to, for example, an ID.4, which is its closest relative in the Volkswagen Group range. Comfortable looking interior. This is certainly good. We've been driving this for a fair few hours and didn't have any problems. This seat here has two memory slots and massage function. The passenger seat is mechanically adjusted. However, we have seen versions where you also get the same electrical adjustment systems on the passenger side. There are some nice functions in the central console. You've got the single charger here, just slot your phone in there. This one isn't a charger, although it really should be. This is one nice function, is if you open up this here, you can see that this actually removes with the cup holders. You can put it somewhere underneath this console, and if you take this away you get a really large space here for putting things that you want to put in a really large space. Another particularly fun aspect is that behind this LCD screen, if you lift it up, is a secret compartment, so you can hide something valuable in there, and only people who know about Ford Explorers will be able to realise there's something there. It's also locked when the car's locked as well. Overall, I think this interior looks rather nice. It definitely feels of a higher quality than equivalent Volkswagens. Dependable, sober, not exactly exciting, but that's what you want in a family SUV. This is the B&O soundbar, designed to look a bit space-like, sitting above the dashboard. Decent amount of rear space, and if you actually don't have a middle passenger, you can pull this forward and you get an armrest with a couple of cup holders. So I'm a normal sized guy with a normal sized person sitting in front of me, which would have been me a few minutes ago. You can see I've got pretty decent knee room. I did try this with a guy who's 6'5" sitting in front, and it was a bit more cramped, but there aren't so many people of that size around. It's a bit hot here, so I'm looking a bit sweaty. And some of that is helped by this rather lovely sunroof above me. You can see I've got plenty of space, and that sunroof really adds to the sense of space. So this sunroof is a standard feature for all premium cars in the UK. Rear seat passengers don't get control over the heat, but they can direct the airflow for the air conditioning, and you can see there's a couple of USB-C ports as well, so they can charge their devices. And there are a couple of seat back pockets for your kids to keep their copies of the history of Yugoslavia, or whatever it is kids read these days. So this is a family SUV, so you want a decent boot size, and it definitely delivers pretty good amount of space in this regard. We really like this feature, the way this blind actually comes up with the boot at the same time, so you don't have to worry about getting it out of the way if you want to use the whole boot space. You can obviously remove this as well. I don't have the exact figures for the boot space to hand, but you can see it's reasonably sizable, definitely larger than a family hatchback. This is actually a space underneath. You can remove this entirely, but if you do that you won't get a flat floor. Another nice feature of the boot is you've got this central bit. If you want to put something tall and thin, maybe some tent poles or some skis if you're going skiing, and you've got a typical 60-40 arrangement here. So you can see it's perfectly flat with this floor here. If you took it out, there'd be a lip, but that's a decent amount of space. If you look at the written review, you'll see the exact figures for that. We'll track those down for that. There's not a lot of difference in battery size between the all-wheel drive and the rear-wheel drive car, and there's not a huge amount of difference in terms of WLTP range either. It's 602 kilometers for the rear-wheel drive car and 566 kilometers for the all-wheel drive car, so you don't lose a lot by going for that extra power. Of course, the charging port is CCS. You get 11 kilowatt AC on all cars, but the DC differs depending on which car you have. With the rear wheel drive car you get 135 kilowatts, and with the all wheel drive car you get 185 kilowatts. That means that there's not that much difference in terms of how long it takes to charge because of the battery size. 10 to 80 with the rear wheel drive car takes 28 minutes approximately, and with the all wheel drive car 26 minutes. Now these are only provisional figures. We were driving quite spiritedly and this is a mountainous place, so these figures probably shouldn't be taken as gospel, but I was getting about 3.1 miles per kilowatt hour with the all-wheel drive car. That was driving a lot in sport mode, and with the rear-wheel drive actually 3.5, so that gives you a pretty decent range. Don't have the range figures for the 52 kilowatt hour car. We'll bring you those when they launch it later this year. You're probably going to get at least 240 miles of real-world range out of either one of these cars, and more like 250 plus with the rear-wheel drive car. That's definitely usable for long distance. Fairly standard controls. If we look at the left-hand side of the steering wheel, you've got some buttons here. Volume controls, they're a little bit irritating because they're right next to all of the adaptive cruise control functions. Normally you'd have those separated out. There are some menu functions on the right hand side as well. On the left hand stalk of the steering wheel, this is a double function stalk that does windscreen wipers, indicators and lights. In typical Volkswagen fashion, you've got this knob, you turn it up for drive, once more for B mode, neutral, reverse, and then park is in this button on the end here. Although the shape is slightly different, this dashboard display looks very, very similar to the Volkswagen equivalent. This car, which is a premium version, has rather a nice head-up display as well, which gives you everything you need, so you probably won't need to look at that dashboard display. These slightly cheap-looking membrane buttons are another leftover from the Volkswagen connection. You'll notice the air conditioning controls. There's a few other controls like volume here, and you can turn on the parking camera. These touchscreen controls, although they are on the touchscreen, they're always visible. They don't disappear, so at least you know where they are. So now to that central screen, you can see it's got, that's the home function, and you can see it's got the sat nav on screen. If I press that, it should go full screen. You can see it continues a route that they've set for me. So if we go into this button up here, we've got all the different functions here. So you've got mobile apps, you've got CarPlay, and I believe Android Auto as well. You can change the driver assistance mode. Some of these are a bit intrusive, as we'll talk about when we get to that part of the review. If charging, you can see that the really nice charging interface there. Some virtual vehicle settings with the obligatory mode of a big car that you can look at there. So the driver profiles, you can't get to these any other way than here. With this particular car, you've got normal, eco sport, individual and traction. You don't get the traction mode with a rear wheel drive car. So if you do a lot of kind of off-roading type stuff or intend to, you probably want to get the dual motor version. And finally you've got other things like, radio, the usual things, precondition the battery, which is automatic if it knows you're going to a charging spot. With the rear wheel drive car having 286 PS and the all wheel drive car only having a bit more at 340 PS, actually the acceleration isn't so different between the two. The rear wheel drive car can hit 62 miles per hour in 6.4 seconds, and the all wheel drive car drops out to 5.3 seconds. You do notice the difference. As I said, there's one difference in terms of drive modes. You've got the track mode, the off-road option with the all-wheel drive car, and I'm driving down a bit of an off-road track here, just a slight sideline track. However, having driven both cars, the steering is definitely lighter on the rear-wheel drive car. Conversely, the all-wheel drive car feels a little bit more solid on the road, and the ride quality is better. Makes us wonder that actually the suspension setup was aimed at the all-wheel drive car, and with the rear-wheel drive car being a bit lighter, it doesn't work quite so well for that car. I've had the opportunity to drive this car on lots of different types of roads, mountains, in highways, around town. It's pretty capable in all situations. This isn't a driver's car, it's meant to be a family car, and it fulfills those criteria pretty well. It feels pretty comfortable in most driving conditions, and with that very, very good range, you can really go long distance. You know, you can take your kids back to university in it, plenty of luggage space, really good all-round car. I'm not going to talk too extensively about the safety features. You probably heard, you can hear one right there. It's telling me that I'm going a little bit over the speed limit, but only by about 4 kilometers an hour in a 60 zone. Some of the features, like the lane of departure avoidance, bit intrusive for some drivers. I don't mind it. Some other people who are on this press launch really wanted to turn that off. It's worth mentioning that most of those safety features, like lane departure warning, they have to actually have them on by default. You can turn them off in the menu if you want to, if they annoy you, but you have to do that every single time. So they have announced prices for this in the UK, but just for those two larger battery cars, not the 52 kilowatt hour car. You could pick up the basic rear wheel drive car for £40,000, and for a car with a range of 600 kilometers, which, let's face it, is quite a lot of miles. That's getting well over 350 miles. That's pretty good. However, for the all-wheel drive premium car, you're talking about £50,000. These prices compare fairly accurately with the ID.4, which is one of its most direct competitors. It also strangely competes probably with its own Mustang Mach-E as well. The ID.4 is a slightly bigger car. It's maybe about 10 centimeters longer than this car. I think in the real world you probably wouldn't notice that. The Tesla Model Y, which is an obvious comparison, is a bit bigger still. However, that does have a lot more space in the back. You can fit a lot more luggage in that than this car. It doesn't have the rugged appeal, and one of the things that you're going to be attracted to from this car is that kind of Ford no-nonsense look and feel, and it certainly has that. It's fairly obvious why Ford took us here to Slovenia to test this car. Really rugged, decent roads, but lots and lots of mountains and lots of different types of driving style. It does feel at home on a mountain road. You can go around corners at a fair amount of speed, and it feels pretty comfortable. So this car does tick quite a lot of boxes for families. Although I think the price is pretty much on par with the competition, doesn't undercut it, and Ford is supposed to be a value brand after all, quality but for value. Doesn't quite hit that mark, but I think it's going to sell fairly well because it is very practical. Not exceptional in any particular way, but certainly ticks boxes in terms of space, range, performance. It is a lot more than just a rebodied ID.4. It has a different ethos about it, whereas the ID.4 is very much more of an urban SUV. This has a little bit more appeal for people who want to, you know, go camping and go off-road a bit more. Do you expect Ford to absolutely trounce the competition? Does it even have to? It's a well-known brand, and this feels like a quality car. So that's the Ford Explorer. Not a car you're going to get overly excited about, but certainly as dependable as you'd expect from the Ford brand. It's got some good features, it's got decent interior space, the range is very good in its class. We can't wait to see it when it does arrive in right-hand drive form in the UK. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel.